Hey folks, so this is a continuation of section 11.1. This is going to be the third lesson video in 11.1, and this particular part of the lesson video is only going to cover a triangle that has two solutions. I would call it the most challenging one, so I wanted to give it its own video. We're going to work through example number 10. This is once again section 11.1, example number 10. Now I want to walk through the flow chart, so I have both of these pulled up. And let's walk through the flow chart and see, first of all, how I knew it was going to be a two-solution example. So first question on my flow chart is the triangle SSA. And we can look at our example and we say, hey, yeah, I've got two sides, one angle, and two of them have the same name. So yes, it's SSA. And then our second question is the side with the same name greater than the other side. And so we look at our example, the side with the same name is not greater than the other side. So in our flow chart then, I have to follow the no value. And so I'm going in this direction. The side with the same name is less than the other side. My angle is acute, so I'm going to be following in this direction. And this is where I'm going to run my test. And so you can see that I've set up my test here. So this guy is the side with the same name. This guy is the other side. And this is the sine of my angle. And when I plug this in, I get a greater than. And you'll look at the flow chart. Whenever you get greater than, I'm sorry, I just circled the less than. Whenever you get greater than, you're going to get two solutions. So I'm going to hide my flow chart here in a moment just so I can have a full screen on my notes. But you've got your flow chart in front of you. And this is going to be the four things that we're going to be doing. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter. Steps 2 and 3, these two can be interchangeable. You have to do the first step first, and then you're going to need to do the last step last. But the second and the third step, those can be interchangeable. So that's what I'm going to be following then as we go along. So you want to have that set in front of you. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that so that we can see the whole entire screen of notes. Now, I've drawn a picture, and this picture is a lot like my picture that I had at the very beginning of the ambiguous notes, not even in a lesson video, but in a notes video. You'll see that I've been given angle B. This is an angle that I know. I also know side B, which has to be opposite angle B, so that's where you see over here. I know side A, and so I've drawn this guy as side A. That means that this guy down below, this side has to be side C, but I don't know how long it is, so that's why I have an arrow on it. I have no idea how long it is. And I also don't know what angle A is or what angle C is. And so just want you to understand that this side B here that I drew, that guy could actually also be right here. Okay, since I don't know what the angle is, it doesn't really matter what angle I've got here. Another way that I could draw this here, let me see if I can. Yeah, this guy can totally swing back and forth. It can either be here or it can be right here, as long as the length stays the same. So just so that you understand here, I've got two triangles. One of my triangles is this original guy here that I had drawn. That's one of my triangles. And then the other triangle is this guy right here. Okay, so these are the two triangles that I want to look at. Now, notice that my angles are going to be a little different too. If my angle is right here, I'm going to call this angle A1, and you'll notice that that guy is an acute angle. But if my angle is right here, notice that it's obtuse. I'm going to call that one A2. Okay. If I'm going to call this side here side B, because both of them are side B. That length is unchanging. It was given to me. This whole angle at the top we'll call angle C1. But just the little tiny angle there on the inside, this guy, this guy we'll call C2. Okay, and then the whole side, this would be little c1 because it's part of that first big triangle. And then this little side would be called C2. So that hopefully you can kind of see where each piece belongs. Now, you'll notice I've already set up charts, one for each triangle. Make sure you set up 2 whole charts. Now, on your flow chart, the very first thing that you were told to do is to use the law of sines to get the acute angle. And so that's going to be this guy right here. So we're going to use the law of sines. And as you look at your table here, you can tell that's the only thing that you can do mathematically is to use the law of sines with the a fraction and the b fraction. Now, remember something that I mentioned earlier in the lesson video for the first half of section 11.1? I told you that the law of sines is only able to find an acute angle. It cannot find an obtuse angle. So A1 is acute. I can use the law of sines on it, but A2 is not acute. It's obtuse. The law of sines isn't going to be able to find that angle. I'll need to use something different. So let's go ahead and do what the flowchart says to do first, and let's use the law of sines to find the acute angle. In this case, that's going to be angle A1. So I'm going to come down to my work then. This is going to be step number 1. There's my a fraction. There's my b fraction. I'll go ahead and multiply on both sides by 890. Go ahead and put that into your calculator. And then use the inverse sign to get angle A1. So that angle A1 is 72 degrees, and it's not surprising that it was an acute angle because the law of sines can only find acute angles. So we'll come back up to our chart, and we'll go ahead and put our 72-degree angle in there. I would strongly recommend that you store this in your calculator. If you need a video on storing your calculator, I will look for one later on today on YouTube, and I'll post it for you. But we did go through this before we went to the virtual classroom. But I would strongly recommend storing each of these values in your calculator as you go along. All right, so we have our angle A. You'll notice here, here's a great picture of this. Just use this new picture here. This is the angle that we just found. This is the next angle we would like to find. Notice that what we have here, do you remember small opposite small, medium opposite medium, and large opposite large? We've talked about that in class on quite a few occasions. Well, since I have 2 sides that are exactly the same in this tiny little triangle, because remember this is side B and this is also side B, since they're identical to each other, then I also know that the angle that's opposite, those 2 angles have to be exactly the same size. Well, if this first one here I found was 72 degrees, that means that this one has to be 72 degrees. And you'll notice now that A1 and A2, these guys are supplements of each other. So in order to find my obtuse angle, all I have to do is find the supplement of the acute angle that I just found. Okay? So that's what you see here with this tip for number 2. The partner that has the same name is a supplement. So all I have to do is 180 minus what we just found, and that's going to be my obtuse angle. So 180 minus A1 gives me my A2. My A2 then is this 107 number. Again, store this in your calculator. Whoops, I unhid the wrong thing there. A2 is 107.8431. Store that in your calculator. So now it's easy to see by our charts that I have 2 out of 3 angles on each triangle. And so all I need to do now is find the third angles. So we'll come back down to our work, find the third angle of each triangle. This is done by adding and subtracting. So in order to find angle C1, I'm going to use my adding and subtracting, and I did store this in my calculator. You'll notice that I've got these tiny little letters here that, that I've been writing down. I've got one there. I have one right here. I've got one up here. These are the letters that I've used to store in my calculator, just simply so that I didn't forget how I stored it. And then in order to find angle C2, I'm going to do the same type of math, and I'll go ahead and put that in as well. Okay, so then that gives me my third angles. I can go back to my chart, and there's my third angles. And now it's going to be really simple to use the law of sines. I'll use the B and the C fraction. I have to do this twice. Once for my first picture and once for my second picture. But this is going to find my missing two sides. So we'll come back down to our work page. We're going to find the missing sides by using the law of sines. All right, so there's my C fraction. And you see that I've already got my B fraction set up. And go ahead and multiply on both sides by the sine of that 59. That 59 was stored in my calculator, so I'm just using what was stored. And then put it all in, and I get 806.7829. So now what I'm going to do, that gives me my C1. And I'm going to do the same type of math to get my C2. So once again, now I'm only looking at these two fractions, the B fraction and the C2 fraction. So we'll multiply on both sides by the sine of 23. Once again, that 23 number was stored in my calculator. So then when I enter it all in, I get 379.6449. You may have to watch this video a couple of times before you start getting the hang of the two solution triangle. I promise, you will have something like this on your test. So please make sure that you get a good hold of the ambiguous triangle.